Just imagine a world where you will hold your entire future in the palm of your hand, when a tiny glowing crystal will guide you through an existence in which each day is more wonderful than the last, where it will be possible for you to obtain the fulfillment of every fantasy, the satisfaction of every vanity, the absolute attainment of every wish.
This shit's got to go. The Venus Project is an attempt to bring world peace and all the nations together. If you don't want war, killing, most crimes, you have to redesign the way society works. I was looking at a gear on a table, and I saw the cities of the future. I think all inventions are based upon experiences like that. I don't think they come out of nowhere.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer presents the Saul David production of Logan's Run. A fantastic journey through a world beyond imagination. Welcome to the 23rd century. The perfect world of total pleasure. Imagine a world in which you need never be alone. Every pleasure is yours to experience.
Hello out there. Peabody and Sherman here. The Wayback Machine, my incomparable invention for traveling through time, has been set for...
2,400 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato introduced the world to the lost continent of Atlantis. His description of the ancient empire was so vivid and enticing, explorers began a search to find it and uncover its secrets.
Which direction are we heading, Mr. Peabody?
South, Sherman. Specifically, Florida. And
the most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow. A community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise.
No city of today will serve as the guide for the city of tomorrow. Epcot will be a planned environment, demonstrating to the world what American communities can accomplish through proper control of planning and design. Epcot begins with an idea new among cities built since the birth of the automobile. We call it the radial plan. Picture a wheel. Like the spokes of the wheel, the city fans out along a series of radials from a bustling hub at the center of Epcot. A network of transportation systems radiate from this central hub, carrying people to and from the heart of the city. These transportation systems circulate to and through 4 primary spheres of activity surrounding the central core. First, the area of business and commerce. Next, the high-density apartment housing. Then the broad green belt and recreation lands. And finally, the low-density neighborhood residential streets. Epcot's dynamic urban center will offer the excitement and variety of activities found only in metropolitan cities: cultural, social, business, and entertainment. Among its major features will be a cosmopolitan hotel and convention center, towering 30 or more stories. Shopping areas, where stores and whole streets recreate the character and adventure of places round the world. Theaters for dramatic and musical productions. Restaurants, and a variety of nightlife attractions. And a wide range of office buildings, some containing services required by Epcot's residents, but most of them designed especially to suit the local and regional needs of major corporations. But most important, this entire 50 acres of city streets and buildings will be completely enclosed. In this climate-controlled environment, shoppers and theater goers and people just out for a stroll will enjoy ideal weather conditions, protected day and night from rain, heat and cold, and humidity. Here the pedestrian will be king, free to walk and browse without fear of motorized vehicles. Only electric-powered vehicles will travel above the streets of Epcot's central city.
The future must extend an invitation for all people to join in, because the problems affect everybody.
There's just one catch.
Ruling classes throughout history have sought to perfect systems of control over their people. Many of them have the philosophy that the average man can't be trusted. He can't make his own decisions, so an elite class of experts is needed to keep society from deteriorating. Regardless of the underlying philosophy, the desire to manipulate the masses has existed throughout human history. The Romans bred in circuses worked for a time, but in the age of technocratic world controllers, a scientific approach to manipulate the masses was needed.
He sees his cities as tools for fostering humanistic values.
You have to declare all the Earth's resources as the common heritage of all the world's people. I feel that environment shapes our values. The people we know, the people we identify with. What will drive people in the future? A world without war, without hatred, without bigotry, without prejudice.
Social engineering is not restricted to extravagant marketing ploys aimed at consumers. The state, utilizing the social sciences, also seeks to manipulate the masses. Schooling is perhaps the most prominent tool in this effort. In the first publication of the General Education Board, dated 1904, Fred Gates, one of the creators of the foundation, outlined an agenda for the organization. This agenda did not aim to aid in the progress of society, but instead sought to maintain a docile population.
When the tiny crystal in the palm of your hand flashes its final message, your time is up.
After that, we have to gradually outgrow the need for all the artificial boundaries that separate people. So we have one world working cooperatively toward preserving the environment and all life as we know it.
My name is Charlotte Thompson-Iserbaid, and I served as Senior Policy Advisor in the United States Department of Education under the Reagan administration, during which I had access to all of the most important documents for the restructuring of not only American education, but global education. And I'm also the author of The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which gets into all of this, gives the background of what I saw not only in the Department of Education, but as a local school board member.
Schooling is a form of adoption. You give your kid away at his or her most plastic years to a group of strangers. You accept a promise, sometimes stated and more often implied, that the state, through its agents, knows better how to raise your children and educate them than you, your neighbors, your grandparents, your local traditions do.
There has to be a language that's not subject to interpretation. When you read the Bible, you say, Jesus meant this. He says, no, it meant that. Another verse, he meant this. So you have the Lutheran, the Seventh-day Adventist, because it's subject to interpretation.
John Taylor Gatto's experience as a school teacher for 30 years gave him a unique perspective on the modern schooling system of the United States. He saw the effect of the system on his children, and he didn't like what he saw. Gatto dedicated his life to researching the origin and intent of this system after he quit teaching in 1991. His book, The Underground History of American Education, is the sum of his research. The modern schooling system of the United States was in fact originally intended not to produce thinking individuals, but efficient, obedient, and predictable people.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own.
A language is not subject to interpretation. Mathematics, engineering, chemistry, physics, structural engineering, not subject to interpretation.
How does the Venus Project compare with communism?
Communism uses money. It has social stratification. It has banks. It has armies and navies, prisons and police. We don't have any of those.
Capricorn 15s, born 2244. Enter the carousel.
Over the many years of its operation, several different approaches to schooling have been undertaken in America, but all within the same basic framework. Gatto covers a number of important documents throughout his book, but one in particular deserves unique attention: the Behavioral Science Teacher Education Program. This 1969 study, funded by the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, and the Bureau of Research, contain disturbing predictions that have largely come to pass. Under a section titled Futurism as a Social Tool and Decision-Making by an Elite, the document outlines a dark future.
This is the time of renewal.
Long-range planning and implementation of plans will be made by a technological, scientific elite. Political democracy in the American ideological sense will be limited to broad social policy. Even there, issues, alternatives, and means will be so complex that the elite will be influential to a degree which will arouse the fear and animosity of others. This will strain the democratic fabric to a ripping point.
What is the most single important aspect of this project?
A resource-based economy, to declare all the resources the common heritage.
And how do you feel about the term democracy?
Democracy is a con game.
Most people will tend to be hedonistic, and a dominant elite will provide bread and circuses to keep social dissension and disruption to a minimum. A small elite will carry society's burdens. The resulting impersonal manipulation of most people's lifestyles will be softened by provisions for pleasure-seeking and guaranteed physical necessities.
So don't use the word freedom. Say there's a certain range of behavior we permit in this society, and this is what it is.
I don't want this socialistic handout society. See, these ZeitGuisE people never bother to stop and think about what it is Project Venus is. They never stop to think. See, what they do is they probably watch the ZeitGuisE movies, and I'm speculating here, so don't jump my shit. But I think they've watched 1 or 2 or 3 of the ZeitGuisE movies, and that's about all the research they've ever done. See, they've never looked into things like Agenda 21. They've never looked into things like, oh, I don't know, Lucius Trust at the UN, the ties that the ZeitGuisE Peckerwood has to these neo-Satanists. They've never looked into that.
The controlling elite will engage in power plays largely without the involvement of most people.
What they saw was the carrot. You won't have to work. And that was all they needed to know. Because they're like, oh, the Federal Reserve System is corrupt. You know, competition is bad. Right? Individual ownership of things are bad. But look at this Project Venus. I won't have to work. And they grab onto that. And they hold on for dear life. That is their new paradigm. Right? Just as it was uncomfortable for them to have the left-right paradigm shattered. You know? Well, they just grab onto a new paradigm. They're still sheep just following a different shepherd.
Identify.
Mass media transmission will be instantaneous to wherever people are in form suited to their particular needs and roles. Each individual will be saturated with ideas and information. Relatively few individuals will be able to maintain control over their opinions. Most will be pawns of competing opinion holders. How could society be moved in this direction? Certainly not all societal trends are the product of careful planning, but wealthy elites helped to develop the social sciences in an attempt to do just that. One of the main influences in developing and directing the social sciences in America were tax-exempt foundations. The various Rockefeller foundations were especially influential. Sociologist Donald Fisher notes in his book, Fundamental Development of the Social Sciences, that the bargain struck between the foundations and the social sciences increasingly involved the state and shifted the balance toward the practical, technocratic side of the efforts to increase social control. Rockefeller philanthropy facilitated and pushed the social control ideology in this direction. In this way, philanthropy exercised a fair amount of control over the bridging that occurred between social sciences and government.
The minute you hear freedom and democracy, watch out. We never had complete freedom, because the word freedom has no meaning. Don't use the word freedom. Don't use the word freedom. Don't use the word freedom.
In 1954, the Reese Committee, chaired by Carol B. Reese, produced its findings regarding the influence of tax-exempt foundations in the field of education. The report also briefly mentions their influence in politics, propaganda, social sciences, and international affairs. Renee A. Wormser, author of the book Foundations, Their Power and Influence, served as counsel for the committee. Mr. Wormser's testimony stated in part, back to this term social engineering. Again, is there not a certain presumption or presumptuousness on part of the social scientists to consider themselves a group of the elite who are solely capable and should be given the sole opportunity to guide us in our social development? They combine the tendency toward the self-generated social engineering concept with a high concentration of power in that interlocking arrangement of foundations and agencies, and it seems to me you might have something rather dangerous.
Logan's Run. It begins where imagination ends.
Our culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Well, all's well that ends well, Mr. Peabody.
Precisely, Sherman. By the way, what is that you have in your hand?
This? Oh, just an old rusty key I found in the dirt.
Well, congratulations, my boy. You are now a landowner.
Landowner, Mr. Peabody?
Of course, Sherman. You now own one of the Florida Keys.